Welcome to the sixth reading of my memoir, The Innocence of Guilt. Troubles at school and home. My brother and I became inseparable. In our play, I bossed him around quite a bit, and he seldom complained. At the age of 4.5, he matched me in height. Along with our matching brown hair and hazel eyes, we easily passed as twins when out in public. We enjoyed the basic toys of the time: watercolors, wax crayons, wooden ninepins, tin wind-up cars and figures, tin spinning tops, plasticine, board games such as tiddlywinks, snakes and ladders, and drafts. David collected dinky cars and lead toy soldiers. I cherished my dolls and tea set. On special occasions, if we asked Daddy nicely, he'd let us look at his precious Will's cigarette card collection, but he'd supervise us. He didn't have anything from his childhood other than those cards and a few books, and he took great care of them. Quite unlike my mother in that respect. I acquired her German porcelain doll at 3 years of age. I treasured it, but couldn't protect it later on from a girl who accidentally dropped it on the concrete pad and cracked its beautiful face. My mother hadn't cared. "It's only a doll," she'd said, with a shrug of her shoulders, but I mourned the damage and was none too happy with the girl. The doll represented my mother's childhood, so a piece of the past therefore broke along with it, a piece of her. At the end of our garden, behind the apple tree, sat a low brick wall. Behind the wall stood a high wooden fence that separated us from the houses on the other side. David and I pressed our faces against the fence to catch shadow glimpses of children playing amidst muted sounds of laughter. Not knowing their identity, we called them the mystery children. The brick wall served as our snail racetrack, an afternoon's entertainment, lining the snails up at one end of the wall, seeing which would make it to the other end first. It required much patience. The snails weren't smart enough to know a race was on. We poked and positioned them, watched and waited while they figured it out. That section of garden next to the compost heap also served as our fly cemetery. With the knowledge I gleaned a little later on from attending Sunday school, we gave them elaborate funerals, sung hymns, said prayers, and constructed little graves with pebble borders and twig crosses. As my 5th birthday fell in October 1947, I didn't start school until the spring term of 1948. Stockhorse Street Infant School was a short walk around the corner from my house, a one-story red brick building surrounded by iron railings and a large gate at the entrance. The left-hand side enrolled backward children, and the right-hand side took normal children like me, all set for a promising future in the big, wide, now free world. Being forced to go to school wasn't freedom. I feared going to some unfamiliar place to be left with strangers. I didn't relish the company of other little boys and girls. I only wanted my brother to play with, and told Mummy so. On the first day of school, I cried bitterly, and Mummy half dragged me down to the street. I only agreed to stay when she promised to come back at playtime with a new doll for me. Deposited, abandoned, but determined to make the best of it because of the doll, I settled down. My teacher, Miss Phillips, treated me kindly, and school lost a little of its terror. In the classroom stood a large ornate rocking horse. It carried 5 children with its extra seats on the front and back. We took turns, and a play lady rocked the magnificent animal while we squealed in delight. Before school, the Drury Farm horse-drawn milk float stopped outside the gate. The milkman carried the rattling crates into the school. I came to dread the sound. And a teacher placed small bottles around the black iron coal stove that heated the classroom. At playtime, I found myself in a queue with my classmates and received a bottle of warm milk to drink. I loathed the taste of milk, although my mother tried to sneak it into my food in various ways. Each night, my brother gladly ate dicky birds, a bowl of bread chunks soaked in warm sugared milk, but if I ate any, they soon found their way up out of my stomach into the bowl, which continued to be my nighttime security. I grudgingly took the small bottle, set it down on the playground outside, and walked away. All the other children eagerly drank theirs, using the straws that came with them. The play lady sidled over to me and said, "Why aren't you drinking your milk, dear?" I said I didn't like it. "Nonsense," she replied, and went and retrieved the bottle. "Open your mouth," she said firmly, and when I refused, she grabbed me and forced the straw through my lips. I sucked on it, but choked the milk back up, splattering both of us. She pushed me away in disgust, and I heard her complaining about me to my teacher. I ran to the railings to look for Mummy and the promised doll. Sure enough, true to her word, she stood outside, holding it up for me to see. If only I could leave and go home, but the school gate remained locked, keeping Mummy out and me inside, in a prison I would never escape from. Even my new doll wasn't a powerful enough incentive to justify my return to school the next day, but back I had to go. After a few days of my moans and groans, my mother went to the school and told the teacher that I didn't drink milk, but her explanation didn't change anything. The school's food supplement policy was government mandated. Free orange juice, cod liver oil, and the specially designed 1/3 of a pint bottle of milk was allocated to each child daily. The government generally believed that most children had suffered nutritional deprivation during the war years. I don't think that applied to my brother or me, not with our mother stealing food from the hospital. Much more than eggs, and those tasteless Energen rolls may have found their way into her brown bag, as we were both healthy. Despite her intervention, things at school grew worse as the play lady continually forced milk on me, labeling me stubborn and difficult. Even my mother lost patience with my resistance, and my father believed that I was putting it all on. He said my brother drank his milk with no fuss, so why couldn't I? The play lady ensured I paid for my indiscretion. On good weather days, when she and one of the teachers carried the rocking horse outside and children clamoured for rides, she ignored my request for a turn. Even discounting those troubles, I found my first school experience less than satisfying and at times boring. All I played in the little school band was a triangle. I deserved something with a lot more volume. By the time I entered Miss Green's class at the start of my second year, I had read all the books in the school library, but she called my mother in to discuss my problems. I lived in a time that still held to the Victorian ideal of children being seen and not heard, and unfortunately I sometimes gave the impression of knowing more than the teacher. If something didn't make sense to me, I would challenge it, But if my avid reading ability created trouble, it went beyond my understanding, or indeed my parents'. I learnt things from my reading. I believe, too, that because I could read better than any of the other children my age, no other school subjects mattered. While they stumbled over every tiny word in their school readers, I grew fidgety, longing to move on to more interesting books. I picked up a certain frustration directed towards me, but the reasons for it eluded me. At home with the family, I regularly sat in a corner of the living room with a book and read out loud to them. When I reached the last page, I slammed the book closed and exclaimed, "The end!" This must have annoyed them, and sometimes they deliberately ignored me. I kept repeating, "The end," until they received the message and acknowledged me. The little performer was determined to have her audience. Our back garden and the inside of the house gradually resembled a mini farm as, along with the cat and the chickens, other animals entered our lives. My mother kept a caged yellow singing canary and a gentle golden Labrador dog named Jill. My father maintained a small pond in which he bred fancy goldfish to sell. A black rabbit named Sooty occupied a hutch, and a pair of white ducks named Bubble and Squeak took up residence in a pen next to the chickens. The ducks derived their names from a popular dish of leftover fried-up cabbage, onions and potatoes, which graced many a working-class family's table. David and I had pet tortoises named Jerry and Joey. They lived in a small run outside. A small brown speckled bantam hen enjoyed the freedom of the garden and often entered the scullery, annoying my mother by pooping on the floor. So tame, I could sit it on my lap and pet it. The reason for so many animals was my father's soft spot for them, especially if they suffered injuries. He saved a jackdaw from a local cat and built an aviary for it by the back door against my mother's wishes. With the best of intentions, he clipped its wings, hoping to keep it as a pet, but regretted it when poor Jack perched captive in his prison. Untouchable, untamable, sadly deprived of the freedom to fly. Thank you for listening. Please feel free to subscribe, like, or comment on this reading, and hopefully you will tune in to the next one. Bye for now.